The whistle of the locomotive pierced the autumn air as it pulled into the station at Truth or Consequences, New Mexico Territory, in 1879. Katherine Owens clutched her travel-worn valise with trembling fingers, her heart hammering against her ribs as she peered anxiously through the grimy train window. The platform teemed with strangers, rough-looking men in dusty clothing, women in practical frontier dresses, and a handful of curious onlookers who had come to see who would disembark from the eastbound train. Somewhere in that crowd stood the man she had agreed to marry, a man she had never met, whose face she knew only from a faded daguerreotype sent in correspondence months ago. Katherine had traveled nearly 1,000 miles from her home in Boston, leaving behind the only life she'd ever known after the deaths of her parents had left her penniless and alone at 22. The advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like providence. Established rancher seeks educated, respectable woman of good character for marriage. Passage paid. His letters had been kind, well-written, expressing hope for companionship and promising a good life. But now, faced with the reality of stepping off the train into this wild, unfamiliar territory, Katherine found herself paralyzed with fear. The other passengers filed past her seat, some nodding politely as they made their way to the exit. Katherine remained rooted to her spot, her hands trembling as she smoothed the wrinkles from her navy blue traveling dress. She had imagined this moment countless times during the long journey west, how she would step confidently onto the platform, how she would recognize her fiancé from his photograph, how they would begin their life together. Now, those dreams seemed like foolish fancies. Outside on the platform, August Thornton frowned as the stream of disembarking passengers thinned to a trickle, then stopped altogether. He checked his pocket watch, then compared it against the station clock. The train had arrived on schedule, a rare occurrence, but there was no sign of the woman who was supposed to become his bride. August removed his hat, running a hand through his sun-streaked brown hair before settling the Stetson back atop his head. Perhaps she had changed her mind and never boarded the train in the first place. The thought brought a pang of disappointment sharper than he would have expected. The station master approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "Looking for someone, Mr. Thornton?" "Yes, I was expecting a lady from Boston, Miss Katherine Owens." "All the passengers have disembarked," the station master said with a shrug. "If she was on this train, she'd have come off by now." August nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. "Is there any way to check the passenger manifest?" "Not usually done, but—" The station master glanced at the conductor who was standing nearby. "Jim, you have a Miss Owens on your list." The conductor flipped through his papers. "Yes, sir. Ticket from Boston to Truth or Consequences. Boarded in Boston, transferred in Chicago, and again in Santa Fe." August's eyebrows rose. "She's on the train then, must be," the conductor said. "Unless she got off at an earlier stop." "May I?" August gestured toward the train car. The conductor looked uncertain. "Well, we're due to continue on to El Paso after we take on water and coal, but I suppose a quick look wouldn't hurt." August nodded his thanks and climbed aboard the passenger car. The interior was warm and smelled of coal smoke and human bodies packed too closely together for too long. Most of the seats were empty now, but toward the rear of the car he spotted a solitary figure, a young woman in a navy dress, her head bent as she stared at her gloved hands folded in her lap. A small valise rested at her feet. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Miss Owens." "Katherine Owens." The woman's head snapped up, revealing a pale face framed by chestnut hair tucked neatly beneath a modest bonnet. Her eyes, wide and the color of spring leaves, met his with a mixture of fear and recognition. "Mr. Thornton." Her voice was soft but clear, with the refined accent of the East Coast. August nodded, removing his hat. "August Thornton, yes. I've been waiting for you on the platform." He hesitated, noting the way her fingers clutched at her skirt. "Is everything all right, Miss Owens?" Katherine swallowed hard. How could she explain the overwhelming terror that had seized her? How could she tell this tall, broad-shouldered stranger that she was suddenly afraid of the very future she had chosen? "I'm just gathering myself after the long journey," she managed. It wasn't entirely a lie. The trip had been exhausting, 5 days of constant motion and strange surroundings. August studied her for a moment, his blue eyes kind beneath the weathered tan of his face. He was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and a square jaw covered in a neatly trimmed beard that was a shade darker than his hair. He looked like a man accustomed to hard work and the harsh realities of frontier life, exactly what she had expected, yet somehow more intimidating in person. "It's a long way from Boston," he acknowledged. "Would you like to rest here a bit longer before we head to the ranch, or perhaps get something to eat in town first?" The gentle consideration in his voice loosened something in Katherine's chest. "I'm not sure I can do this," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. August's expression shifted to one of concern. He glanced around, then gestured to the empty seat across from her. "May I?" Katherine nodded, and he sat down, placing his hat on his knee. "What is it that's troubling you, Miss Owens?" he asked quietly. "If it's me or something I wrote in my letters that gave you pause, I'd like to know." "No, it's nothing like that," Katherine assured him. "Your letters were lovely, it's just—" She gestured vaguely toward the window and the town beyond. "This is all so different from what I'm accustomed to. I've never been west of Philadelphia before now, and the idea of marrying a man I've just met—" Her voice trailed off. August nodded slowly. "It's a lot to take in all at once," he agreed. "I can't imagine how overwhelming this must be for you." He seemed to consider something for a moment before continuing. "What if we changed the terms of our arrangement?" Katherine looked at him warily. "What do you mean?" "I proposed marriage in my advertisement because that's what's customary. But there's no reason we need to rush into anything," he said. "You could stay in town, at the hotel, for a while. Get to know the place, and we could get to know each other properly before making any decisions. I'd cover your expenses, of course." The sincerity in his eyes made Katherine's throat tight with unexpected emotion. "You would do that, of course. I want a partnership, Miss Owens, not a prisoner." He offered a small smile. "Truth or consequences isn't Boston, but it's not the end of the earth either. We have a hotel, restaurants, shops. It's growing every year." The whistle blew, signaling the train's imminent departure. The conductor's voice called down the aisle, "All aboard who's coming aboard." 5 minutes to departure. August stood. "It's your choice, Miss Owens. You can continue on this train if that's what you truly want, or you can give truth or consequences a chance. Give me a chance." He extended his hand to her, and Katherine stared at it for a long moment. This man was still a stranger, but there was something reassuring about him, a steadiness she hadn't expected. And the alternative was to continue on a train headed further into unknown territory, or to somehow find the means to return to Boston, where nothing awaited her but an uncertain future of servitude or charity. With a deep breath, Katherine placed her hand in his. "I'll stay," she said, and was surprised to feel a small flutter of anticipation beneath her fear. "At least for a little while." The relief in August's smile was unmistakable. He helped her to her feet and reached for her valise. "Is this your only luggage?" "No, I have a trunk as well." "It should be in the baggage car. We'll retrieve it then. The hotel is just a short walk from the station." He led the way down the aisle, nodding to the conductor as they exited the train. The platform felt less intimidating with August at her side, his solid presence creating a buffer between Katherine and the curious stares of those still milling about. He guided her toward the baggage car, where her trunk was unloaded and placed on a cart. "We'll need to take this to the hotel," August told the porter, passing him a coin. "The Grand Hotel on Main Street." The porter nodded and began to push the cart. Katherine and August followed, moving away from the station and into the town proper. Truth or Consequences was larger than Katherine had expected, with a wide main street lined with wooden buildings, some quite substantial in size. There were businesses of all kinds: a general store, a bank, a post office, several saloons, and the two-story Grand Hotel standing proudly at the corner. "This is the newest building in town," August explained as they approached the hotel. "Built just last year. It's got proper plumbing and everything." The lobby of the Grand Hotel was surprisingly elegant, with polished wooden floors, a crystal chandelier hanging from the high ceiling, and a mahogany reception desk, manned by a thin, balding man in a crisp white shirt. "Mr. Thornton," the clerk greeted August with a nod. "What can I do for you today?" "I need a room for Miss Owens," August replied, gesturing to Katherine. "Your best available, please." The clerk's eyes widened slightly as he took in Katherine's travel-worn appearance. "Of course. We have a lovely room on the second floor facing the mountains." "How long will you be staying with us, Miss Owens?" Katherine glanced at August, uncertain. "Let's start with a week," August suggested. "We can extend it if needed." After the necessary paperwork was completed and the trunk had been delivered to her room, August escorted Katherine upstairs. The room was indeed lovely spacious, with a large bed, a washstand with a porcelain basin, a wardrobe, and a comfortable-looking armchair by the window that overlooked the distant mountains. "This is very nice," Katherine said, removing her bonnet and gloves. August remained in the doorway, respecting her privacy. "I thought you might like to rest and freshen up. Perhaps we could meet for dinner at 6. The hotel dining room is quite good, or there's a cafe down the street that serves excellent food." Katherine nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she truly was. "Dinner would be lovely. The hotel dining room, I think, if that's agreeable. I'll come by at 6 then." August hesitated, then added, "Miss Owens, I want you to know that I understand your trepidation. This is a big step you've taken, coming all this way to a place so different from your home. I promise you'll be safe here and under no obligation that makes you uncomfortable." His sincerity touched something in Katherine. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton. I appreciate your understanding." After he left, Katherine sank onto the edge of the bed, the full weight of her situation settling upon her. She had come so far, risked so much, all for the promise of a new life with a man she knew only through letters. The reality of it, the dusty frontier town, the curious stares, the vastness of the territory surrounding them was both terrifying and exhilarating. She rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the landscape. The mountains in the distance were unlike anything she'd ever seen, their rugged peaks stark against the clear blue sky. This land was harsh, yes, but also beautiful in its wild way. Could she make a life here? Could she find happiness with August Thornton, a man who seemed kind but was still, fundamentally, a stranger? Katherine had no answers, only questions and the faint stirring of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, she had made the right choice after all. The 6 o'clock hour arrived more quickly than Katherine had anticipated. After a brief nap and a careful wash with water from the pitcher, she unpacked a fresh dress from her trunk, a simple but elegant garment of deep rose that complemented her fair complexion. She had just finished securing the last button when a gentle knock sounded at her door. August stood in the hallway, hat in hand, dressed in clean clothing that, while still practical for the frontier, showed an effort had been made. His hair was damp and neatly combed, and the scent of soap and pine accompanied him. "Miss Owens," he said with a slight bow, "you look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. Thornton." Katherine felt a blush warm her cheeks. "And thank you for your patience earlier. I'm afraid the journey left me rather overwhelmed." "No apologies necessary," he assured her as he offered his arm. "Shall we?" The hotel dining room was surprisingly elegant, with white tablecloths, gleaming silverware, and a small vase of wildflowers on each table. Several of the town's residents were already dining, and many nodded or called greetings to August as he escorted Katherine to a table by the window. "You seem to know everyone," Katherine observed after they were seated and had ordered their meal. "It's not a large town," August replied with a smile. "And I've been here since '67, right after the war. Came west looking for a fresh start like many men did." "You fought in the Civil War," August nodded, a shadow crossing his features. "Union Army. Joined up in '63, just after I turned 18. Fought until the end." Katherine sensed the weight of memories behind his words and didn't press further. "And you established a ranch here afterward?" "Not right away," August said, his expression brightening. "Worked as a hand on several spreads first, learning the business. Saved every penny I could. 5 years ago I was able to buy my own place, 160 acres to start with. I've added to it since then." "That's impressive," Katherine said sincerely. "In your letters you mentioned cattle." August nodded, clearly pleased by her interest. "Mostly cattle, yes, about 200 head now, and horses. I breed and train them. Plus we grow enough crops to be largely self-sufficient." "We?" Katherine inquired. "My foreman, Miguel Sanchez, and 3 hands who work the place with us. Miguel and his wife, Rosalinda, live in a small house on the property. She helps with cooking and such. The hands bunk in the bunkhouse." The waiter arrived with their meals: tender beef, potatoes, and fresh vegetables that surprised Katherine with their quality. "The soil here is good for growing with proper irrigation," August explained, noting her appreciation of the food. "There's a lot of potential in this territory." As they ate, August asked Katherine about her journey, and she found herself relaxing enough to share stories of the interesting characters she'd met on the train and the stunning landscapes she'd witnessed crossing the continent. In turn, he told her about the town's history and his place in it. "The name Truth or Consequences is unusual," Katherine remarked. "How did the town come by it?" August chuckled. "It was originally called Hot Springs for the natural springs nearby. But about 10 years ago, there was a famous dispute between 2 of the founding families, the Clarks and the Simmonses. The story goes that old Jedediah Clark accused Hiram Simmons of stealing his horses. Hiram denied it and said Jed was trying to ruin his good name. The whole town took sides. Finally, the local judge, a colorful character named Judge Parker, got fed up and called a town meeting." August leaned forward, his eyes twinkling. "Judge Parker announced that he was renaming the town Truth or Consequences because, as he put it, in this place, a man will either tell the truth or face the consequences of his lies." The name stuck, partly as a joke and partly because folks respected the judge's no-nonsense approach to justice. Katherine laughed, delighted by the story. "That's marvelous. I've never heard of a town with such a dramatic name." "It suits the place," August agreed. "People here value honesty and directness. It can take some getting used to if you're accustomed to more refined conversation." "I appreciate directness," Katherine said, "though I admit Boston society often prizes politeness over honesty." "And what brought you to answer a stranger's advertisement for a bride?" August asked, his tone gentle but direct. "Your letters spoke of losing your parents, but not much more." Catherine's smile faded. She took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. "My father was a professor of literature at Harvard. We lived comfortably, though not extravagantly. My mother died of influenza when I was 16, and my father raised me alone after that. He encouraged my education, taught me himself when the schools would not. We were very close." She paused, the familiar grief welling up again. "Last winter there was a fire in our home. My father, he didn't escape. I was staying with a friend that night, or I would have." She shook her head. "Afterward, I discovered that my father had accumulated significant debts. The house and most of our possessions had to be sold to satisfy his creditors." "I'm very sorry," August said softly. "That must have been devastating." "It was," Katherine acknowledged. "I stayed with friends for a while, but I couldn't impose indefinitely. I found work as a shop girl, then as a companion to an elderly widow, but the positions were—" She hesitated, not wanting to seem ungrateful. "They were not situations where I could envision a future. When I saw your advertisement, it seemed like a chance for something more. A real life with purpose." August nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Everyone deserves a chance at a real life, Miss Owens." The sincerity in his voice warmed something in Catherine's chest. "Please call me Katherine." "Katherine," he repeated, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "And I'm August." The rest of the meal passed pleasantly, with conversation flowing more easily between them. Katherine found herself genuinely enjoying August's company. He was intelligent and thoughtful, with a quiet humor that surfaced unexpectedly and a clear passion for the land and life he had built here. After dinner, August suggested a brief walk to help settle their meal. The sun was setting as they strolled down Main Street, painting the buildings and distant mountains in hues of gold and pink. "It's beautiful," Katherine said, gazing at the spectacular sunset. "Different from the sunsets in Boston, but beautiful in its own way." "The territory has its own kind of beauty," August agreed. "Harsher than what you might be used to, but honest. No pretenses here. The land shows you exactly what it is, for better or worse." They paused at the end of the street, where the buildings gave way to open country. In the fading light, Katherine could make out the shapes of mesas and the distant outline of mountains. "My ranch is about 5 miles in that direction," August said, pointing. "Not too far, but far enough to feel the solitude of the place. You ever get lonely?" Katherine asked, then immediately regretted the question. "I'm sorry, that was rather forward." "No, it's a fair question," August said. "Sometimes, yes, I have good friends in town and my workers at the ranch, but it's not the same as having—" He paused. "As having someone to share your life with, to build something together." The vulnerability in his admission touched Katherine. "That's what I hope for as well," she said softly. "Someone to build a life with." August turned to face her, his expression serious in the deepening twilight. "Katherine, I want you to know that I meant what I said earlier. There's no rush to decide anything. Take all the time you need to get to know the town, the territory, and me. If, in the end, you decide this isn't the life you want, I'll help you return to Boston or go wherever else you might wish." The generosity of his offer left Katherine momentarily speechless. In her experience, men rarely considered a woman's wishes so thoroughly. "Thank you," she finally managed. "That means more than I can express." As they walked back to the hotel, their steps synchronized naturally. August kept a respectful distance, but Katherine found herself aware of his presence in a way that was not unpleasant. He was solid and reassuring, a steadying force in a world that had felt unstable for too long. At the hotel entrance, August removed his hat. "Would you allow me to show you around the town tomorrow? Perhaps visit some of the shops or see the hot springs for which the town was originally named?" "I'd like that very much," Katherine replied. "I'll come by at 10 then, if that's not too early." 10 would be perfect. August hesitated, then reached for her hand, raising it briefly to his lips in a gesture that was both courtly and restrained. "Good night, Katherine. Sleep well." "Good night, August." As Katherine prepared for bed in her hotel room, she found herself replaying their dinner conversation, analyzing August's words and expressions. He was different from what she had expected, more thoughtful, less demanding. The fear that had paralyzed her on the train had receded, replaced by a cautious optimism. Perhaps this journey hadn't been a terrible mistake after all. Perhaps, just perhaps, she had found what she was looking for. The following week passed in a blur of new experiences for Katherine. True to his word, August devoted himself to showing her truth or consequences and its surroundings, carefully gauging her reactions and adjusting their activities accordingly. They explored the shops along Main Street, where Katherine was introduced to the proprietors and welcomed with frontier hospitality. They visited the hot springs, where the warm, mineral-rich waters were said to have healing properties. August took her to a small gathering at the home of his friends, the local doctor and his wife, where Katherine was pleased to find intelligent conversation and genuine warmth. Throughout their outings, August was attentive but never presumptuous. He answered her questions about ranch life honestly, neither romanticizing nor downplaying the challenges. He told her stories about the town and its inhabitants, painting a picture of a community that, while rough around the edges, cared for its own. For her part, Katherine found herself increasingly drawn to August. His quiet strength and integrity impressed her, as did his evident respect for her intelligence and independence. When he spoke of his ranch, his eyes lit with passion and pride. Katherine began to imagine herself in the life he described, challenging, yes, but meaningful in a way her existence in Boston had ceased to be. On the 7th day, August arrived at the hotel as usual, but his expression was more serious than it had been on previous mornings. "I thought we might ride out to see the ranch today, if you're willing," he suggested. "It seems only fair that you should see where I live before making any decisions about your future." Katherine felt a flutter of nervousness at the prospect, but nodded. "Yes, I'd like that very much." August had brought a horse for her, a gentle mare with a smooth gait that he assured her would be comfortable even for someone unaccustomed to riding. Katherine had ridden occasionally in the parks of Boston, but never for any significant distance. After helping her mount and adjusting her stirrups, August swung up onto his own horse, a sturdy bay gelding. The ride took them out of town and into the open country beyond. The landscape was starkly beautiful, rolling plains giving way to rocky hills, dotted with yucca, cactus, and scrubby juniper trees. In the distance, mountains rose blue and purple against the sky. "It's vast," Katherine breathed, taking in the panorama. "Too vast?" August asked, watching her carefully. Katherine considered the question. A week ago, perhaps even yesterday, she might have said yes. But something had shifted inside her. The very openness that had initially frightened her now felt like possibility, like freedom. "No," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Not too vast, just different, beautiful in its own way." August smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "That's how I felt when I first came here, like I could breathe properly for the first time." They rode for about an hour before cresting a gentle rise. Below them stretched a green valley, lush compared to the surrounding landscape. A creek wound through it, its banks lined with cottonwood trees. Nestled in the valley was a substantial ranch house of adobe and timber, several outbuildings, corrals, and pastures where cattle grazed. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a dog ran out to bark at their approach. "Thornton Ranch," August said, a note of pride in his voice. "It's not fancy, but it's solid. The creek never runs dry, even in drought years, and the valley catches more rain than the surrounding land." As they rode closer, Katherine could see that the ranch house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, a one-story structure built in an L shape, with a covered porch wrapping around two sides. The adobe walls were thick, designed to keep the interior cool in summer and warm in winter. Colorful flowers grew in planters along the porch, adding a welcoming touch. A man and woman emerged from the house as they approached. The man was clearly of Mexican descent, middle-aged with a mustache and an easy smile. The woman beside him was plump and pretty, with a round face and kind eyes. "Miguel and Rosalinda Sanchez," August explained as they dismounted. "Miguel is my foreman and right hand. Rosalinda keeps us all fed and the house in order." Introductions were made, with Miguel bowing politely over Katherine's hand and Rosalinda embracing her warmly. "We have heard much about you, Miss Owens," Rosalinda said, her English accented but clear. "Welcome to Thornton Ranch." "Thank you," Katherine replied, touched by their welcome. "I'm very pleased to meet you both." August gave her a tour of the property, starting with the house. The interior was simple but comfortable, with sturdy furniture, colorful woven rugs, and windows positioned to catch the breeze. There was a large main room with a stone fireplace, a dining area, a kitchen, and several bedrooms. August showed her everything except his own bedroom, which he indicated with a gesture but did not enter out of propriety. "It's lovely," Katherine said sincerely. The house felt like a home, not just a shelter, a place where people lived and worked together. After the house, they visited the barns, stables, and corrals. August introduced her to his prize horses and explained the operation of the ranch. His knowledge and passion were evident as he spoke, and Katherine found herself increasingly able to envision life here. By mid-afternoon, they had seen most of the ranch. Rosalinda insisted they stay for an early supper, serving a delicious meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. The conversation flowed easily around the table, with Miguel telling stories that made everyone laugh and Rosalinda gently teasing August about his bachelor habits. As they rode back to town in the golden light of late afternoon, Katherine was quieter than usual, processing all she had seen and felt. "What did you think?" August finally asked, breaking the comfortable silence between them. Katherine considered her answer carefully. "I think you've built something remarkable," she said. "Not just the buildings and the land, but the sense of home, of belonging. The way Miguel and Rosalinda speak about you, it's clear there's mutual respect and affection." August nodded, accepting the compliment with characteristic humility. "They're like family to me. Miguel taught me most of what I know about ranching in this territory." They rode in silence for a few more minutes before Katherine spoke again. "August, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why did you place that advertisement? For a bride, I mean." "You're clearly respected in the community, successful in your business. Surely there must be eligible women in Truth or Consequences or the surrounding areas." August's expression grew thoughtful. "There aren't many unmarried women in the territory, to be honest. Most are spoken for quickly. But that's not the whole reason." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I wanted someone who chose to come here, who wanted the life I could offer but wasn't desperate for it. Someone educated, independent-minded. Someone I could talk with, not just provide for." He glanced at her, his eyes earnest. "When I received your first letter, I knew you were different from the others who had responded. You didn't just tell me what you thought I wanted to hear. You asked questions, expressed concerns, shared your thoughts about books and ideas. You seemed real." Katherine felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "Thank you for being honest, and for showing me your home today." As they approached the town, the setting sun cast long shadows across the street. August escorted Katherine back to the hotel, where they stood for a moment in the lobby. "Tomorrow marks a week since you arrived," August said. "I've paid for your room through the end of the month, so there's no rush to decide anything. But I wonder if you'd join me for dinner tomorrow night. There's something I'd like to discuss with you." Katherine felt a flutter of anticipation. "I'd be delighted." The following evening, August arrived promptly at 6, dressed more formally than usual in a crisp white shirt, black vest, and polished boots. He had even trimmed his beard. The effect was striking. He looked distinguished and handsome in a rugged way that Katherine found increasingly appealing. He escorted her not to the hotel dining room, but to a small, private dining establishment at the far end of Main Street. The restaurant was intimate, with only half a dozen tables, each set with a white tablecloth and candles. "This is a special occasion," August explained as they were seated. "Senor Morales only opens his restaurant on Saturday nights, and only by reservation." The meal that followed was exceptional tender beef, roasted vegetables seasoned with unfamiliar but delicious spices, and a dessert of flan that melted in Katherine's mouth. Throughout dinner, their conversation flowed easily, touching on books they had both read, memories of their childhoods, and hopes for the future. As coffee was served, August's manner grew more serious. "Katherine, I've greatly enjoyed these days we've spent together," he began. "Getting to know you has been, well, it's been wonderful. You're everything your letters suggested and more intelligent, courageous, kind." Katherine felt her cheeks warm at his praise. "Thank you. I've enjoyed our time together as well." August reached across the table, his hand open in invitation. After a moment's hesitation, Katherine placed her hand in his. His fingers were warm and calloused from hard work, but his touch was gentle. "I know this isn't what either of us expected when you first answered my advertisement," he said. "The circumstances are unusual, but I find myself hoping that you might consider staying, not because of our original arrangement, but because, perhaps, you've found something here worth staying for." His blue eyes held hers, open and vulnerable. Katherine felt her heart beating rapidly in her chest. The past week had changed her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The fear that had paralyzed her on the train had given way to something else, a growing affection for this good, honorable man and the life he had built. "I have found something worth staying for," she said softly. "Or rather, someone." The smile that broke across August's face was like the sun emerging from behind clouds. "Then, would you consider a new arrangement between us? Not as a mail-order bride fulfilling a contract, but as Katherine Owens and August Thornton, getting to know each other properly, with the possibility of a future together if that's what we both want." "Yes," Katherine said, her voice stronger now. "Yes, I would like that very much." August's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "There's a small house in town that belongs to the widow Johnson. She's moving to Santa Fe to live with her daughter next month and is looking to rent the place. It would give you independence, a place of your own while we court properly." The thoughtfulness of the suggestion touched Katherine deeply. He was offering her freedom and security, at the same time the chance to be part of the community on her own terms while they explored their growing feelings for each other. "That sounds perfect," she said. August lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you," he said simply. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Katherine's life. She moved into the widow Johnson's house, a cozy 2-room cottage with a small garden, and quickly made it her own. The people of Truth or Consequences welcomed her warmly, especially once it became known that she had experience teaching. The town had been without a proper schoolteacher for months, and Katherine found herself offered a position at the small schoolhouse on the edge of town. August courted her properly, calling at her cottage for scheduled visits, taking her on drives through the countryside, and escorting her to church and social events. Their feelings for each other deepened with each passing day. Katherine discovered that beneath August's reserved exterior lay a man of deep emotions, thoughtful intellect, and unexpected tenderness. For his part, August marveled at Katherine's adaptability and spirit, the way she embraced the challenges of her new life with determination and grace. By the time winter settled over the territory, bringing crisp nights and occasional snow flurries, Katherine had become an integral part of the community. Her students adored her, and she had formed friendships with several women in town, particularly Emma Parker, the doctor's wife, whose intelligence and no-nonsense manner reminded Katherine of her favorite professor's wife back in Boston. One crisp December evening, August arrived at Katherine's cottage with a proposal that made her heart race. "Christmas is coming," he said as they sat together before the fireplace. "I'd like to invite you to spend the holiday at the ranch. Miguel and Rosalinda always prepare a feast, and the hands who don't go home to their families join us. Emma and Doc Parker usually come out too." He paused, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. "It would mean staying overnight. We have plenty of room, of course, and Rosalinda would be there as chaperone. But I understand if you think it improper." Katherine smiled, touched by his consideration. "I would love to come, August. It sounds wonderful." The Christmas celebration at Thornton Ranch exceeded Katherine's expectations. The house was decorated with pine boughs and ribbons, and candles glowed in every window. Rosalinda had outdone herself with the meal: roast turkey, ham, sweet potatoes, 3 kinds of pie, and traditional Mexican dishes that Katherine had never tasted before but found delicious. The evening was filled with laughter, music, and storytelling. Miguel played the guitar while his nephew, one of the ranch hands, accompanied him on the fiddle. They sang songs in English and Spanish, and even convinced Katherine to play the small piano in the corner, a skill from her Boston days that delighted everyone. As the hour grew late, the hands returned to the bunkhouse, and the Parkers departed for town with promises to return for New Year's. Miguel and Rosalinda retired to their small house near the main ranch house, leaving August and Katherine alone by the fire in the main room. "Happy?" August asked, watching her face in the firelight. "Very," Katherine replied. "This has been the most wonderful Christmas I can remember." "Even better than your Christmases in Boston." Katherine considered the question seriously. "Different, but yes, better. In Boston, everything was formal, prescribed, beautiful, but lacking something." She looked around the room at the handmade decorations and simple comforts. "This feels real. It feels like home." August's expression softened. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. "I have something for you," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "A Christmas gift, but also something more." Katherine's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a ring, a simple gold band set with a single perfect pearl. "I know it's not a diamond," August said, suddenly uncertain. "But pearls reminded me of you, beautiful, rare, formed through patience and strength." "It's perfect," Katherine whispered, tears pricking at her eyes. August set the box on the small table beside them and took both her hands in his. "Katherine Owens, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought joy and light into my world in ways I never imagined possible. I love you, your mind, your spirit, your heart. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" The words Katherine had once feared now filled her with joy. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and sure. "Yes, August, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. They were married on a bright spring day in April of 1880, with the entire town turning out to celebrate. The ceremony was held in the small church on the hill, with Emma Parker as matron of honor and Miguel Sanchez standing as August's best man. Katherine wore a gown of ivory satin that she and Rosalinda had worked on together, with lace from her mother's wedding dress incorporated into the bodice. As they exchanged their vows, Katherine thought back to that moment on the train when fear had nearly sent her fleeing from this place, this man, this future. How different her life would have been if August hadn't climbed aboard and waited, if he hadn't shown her the patience and understanding that allowed her to discover, in her own time, the love that now filled her heart. The reception was held at Thornton Ranch, with tables set up under the cottonwood trees and lanterns hanging from the branches. There was dancing and feasting that lasted well into the night, a joyous celebration of not just a marriage but a community that had embraced Katherine as one of their own. Later, when the guests had departed and they were alone at last, August led Katherine to the main bedroom, now their bedroom. He had expanded and renovated the room, adding large windows that looked out over the valley, and built a new, wider bed with his own hands. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thornton," he said softly, drawing her into his arms. "Home," Katherine repeated, the word rich with meaning. "I never imagined I could find such happiness so far from everything I knew." "Are you ever sorry you left Boston?" August asked, his hands gentle as they cradled her face. Katherine shook her head, her heart full to bursting. "Never. My life began the day I met you, August Thornton. Everything before was just preparation for loving you." Their lips met in a kiss that sealed their promises. The first of many such moments in the life they would share, a life built on courage, trust, and a love that had begun with a frightened woman too scared to leave a train, and the patient, kind-hearted man who had climbed aboard and waited. The years that followed brought both joys and challenges to August and Katherine Thornton. They worked side by side to expand and improve the ranch, with Katherine applying her organizational skills and education to the business aspects, while August handled the practical day-to-day operations. Together, they weathered droughts, harsh winters, fluctuating cattle prices, and the occasional conflicts that arose in a territory still finding its way toward statehood. Katherine continued to teach at the schoolhouse in Truth or Consequences, riding into town 3 days a week. Her reputation as an educator grew, and soon families from outlying farms and ranches were sending their children to board in town during the school term, so they could benefit from her instruction. August supported her work wholeheartedly, even building an addition to the schoolhouse when the number of students outgrew the original building. In the spring of 1882, their first child was born, a son they named James William Thornton, after both their fathers. Katherine's labor was difficult and long, leaving her weak and fevered afterward. For 3 terrifying days, August barely left her side, bathing her burning forehead with cool cloths while Doc Parker administered what medicines he had. Rosalinda took charge of the newborn, feeding him goat's milk when Katherine was too ill to nurse. When the fever finally broke and Katherine opened her eyes, clear and lucid for the first time in days, the relief on August's face was profound. He wept as he placed their son in her arms, unashamed of his tears. "I thought I might lose you both," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "I've never been so frightened in my life, not even during the war." Katherine stroked their son's downy head, marveling at his tiny, perfect features. "It would take more than childbed fever to separate me from my family," she said, reaching for August's hand. "We have too much life ahead of us." The following years brought two more children, Elizabeth Rose in 1884 and Thomas Henry in 1887. Both births were easier than the first, and Katherine recovered quickly, resuming her teaching and ranch duties with characteristic determination. As the children grew, Katherine and August instilled in them the values they both held dear: honesty, hard work, compassion, and a thirst for knowledge. James, serious and thoughtful like his father, showed a natural aptitude for ranching from an early age. Elizabeth, spirited and outspoken, excelled in her studies, and declared at the age of 8 that she intended to become a doctor like Uncle Doc Parker. Thomas, the youngest, was quieter than his siblings, but possessed a remarkable talent for understanding and training horses that even August found impressive. In 1889, Truth or Consequences experienced a period of rapid growth when a spur line of the railroad was built connecting the town directly to Santa Fe and points east. New businesses opened, more families arrived, and the town began to shed some of its frontier roughness. Katherine was appointed to the newly formed town council, where her education and balanced approach to progress made her a respected voice in community decisions. August, never one for politics, nevertheless supported Katherine's increasing civic involvement. "You were meant for more than just being a rancher's wife," he told her one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "You have gifts that should be shared with the wider world." "Being your wife and the mother of our children is the foundation of everything I do," Katherine replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "But yes, I do enjoy the work with the council and the school board. It feels like we're building something important here, something that will last." Not all the changes in Truth or Consequences were positive, however. The arrival of the railroad brought opportunists along with honest settlers, and conflicts over land and water rights became more common. In 1890, a dispute between Thornton Ranch and a newly arrived cattle baron named Wesley Hamilton threatened to escalate into violence. Hamilton, a wealthy Easterner with political connections, claimed water rights to a section of the creek that ran through Thornton property, rights that August knew belonged legally to his ranch. When Hamilton's men began constructing a dam that would divert water from Thornton land, August confronted them, backed by Miguel and two of his most trusted hands. Words were exchanged, then threats, and finally guns were drawn. Only the timely arrival of the territorial marshal prevented bloodshed, but the conflict was far from resolved. Hamilton had money and influence, while August had only the truth and his reputation on his side. "We could lose everything," August confessed to Katherine late that night, after the children were asleep. "Hamilton has hired 3 lawyers from Santa Fe and has the ear of the territorial governor." Katherine's expression was determined as she sat across from him at the kitchen table. "Then we'll fight with everything we have. Miguel's cousin Ramon is a lawyer in Santa Fe, not as fancy as Hamilton's men, but he knows the territorial water laws better than anyone. And I can speak to Judge Wallace. He and Emma Parker are old friends." August reached across the table to grasp her hand. "This isn't what you signed up for when you agreed to marry a rancher in the New Mexico territory." Katherine's eyes flashed with the fire that August had come to know and love. "I signed up for a life with you, August Thornton, whatever that might entail. We've built this ranch together, raised our children here. I won't let some entitled Easterner take what's rightfully ours without a fight." The legal battle dragged on for months, consuming much of their savings and forcing them to delay planned improvements to the ranch. Katherine reduced her teaching to 1 day a week, so she could dedicate more time to researching water rights laws and corresponding with potential allies. August worked longer hours with fewer hands, as they couldn't afford to maintain their usual crew. The strain began to show on both of them. August grew quieter, the worry lines on his face deepening, while Katherine lost weight and often worked late into the night by lamplight, poring over legal documents and writing letters. They tried to shield the children from the worst of their concerns, but James, now 9 years old, was perceptive enough to sense the tension. "Is something wrong with the ranch, Pa?" he asked one evening as he helped August mend a fence. "Are we going to have to leave?" August put down his hammer, giving his son's question the serious consideration it deserved. "We're having some troubles with a neighbor about water rights," he explained. "It's complicated grown-up business, but your mother and I are doing everything we can to resolve it." James nodded, his young face solemn. "I heard Tommy Wilson's pa saying at church that Mr. Hamilton is trying to run all the small ranchers out so he can have the whole valley." "Did he now?" August's jaw tightened. "Well, Mr. Wilson is entitled to his opinion, but the Thorntons aren't so easily run off. This land is our home and we'll protect it." "I could help more," James offered earnestly. "I'm getting pretty good with the horses, and Miguel says I've got a natural eye for spotting sick cattle." August felt a swell of pride mixed with sadness that his son felt the need to take on adult worries. He placed a hand on James's shoulder. "You're already a big help, son. The best thing you can do right now is keep up with your studies and be a good brother to Elizabeth and Thomas. Your mother and I will handle the rest." The turning point in their battle with Hamilton came from an unexpected source. Rosalinda's elderly uncle, who had lived in the valley since before the Mexican-American War, produced a set of documents from the Spanish colonial period that established the water rights of the creek in a way that clearly favored Thornton Ranch's claim. These documents, combined with the skillful legal work of Miguel's cousin Ramon and the support of several long-established local families, finally convinced the territorial court to rule in August's favor. Hamilton, furious at the defeat, sold his holdings and returned east, but the victory came at a cost. The legal expenses had depleted their savings, and the neglected work on the ranch during the dispute meant a difficult year ahead. Yet as they celebrated the court's decision with a modest dinner for those who had stood by them, Katherine and August felt a renewed appreciation for the community they had become part of, and the life they had built together. "We may be land poor for a while," August said as they lay in bed that night, Katherine's head resting on his chest, "but we have something Hamilton could never buy with all his money." "What's that?" Katherine asked, though she already knew the answer. "A home," August replied, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "Not just a house or land, but a true home. People who care for us, children we can be proud of, work that matters. And each other," Katherine added softly. "We have each other." "Always," August promised, tightening his arms around her. "That frightened woman too scared to leave the train gave me the greatest gift of my life when she put her hand in mine and decided to stay. And that patient cowboy who climbed aboard and waited gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined," Katherine replied, raising herself up to look into his eyes. "I love you, August Thornton, more today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." The years continued to flow, bringing changes both expected and surprising. New Mexico achieved statehood in 1912, an event celebrated with particular enthusiasm in Truth or Consequences, where Katherine served as chair of the Statehood Celebration Committee. The town had grown considerably by then, boasting a proper hospital, where Elizabeth Thornton, having completed medical school in Denver, served as one of 3 physicians. A bank where Thomas Thornton worked as a loan officer, specializing in agricultural financing, and a high school that was considered one of the finest in the state. James, now 30 years old, had married Emma Parker's niece Caroline and taken over much of the day-to-day management of Thornton Ranch, allowing August and Katherine to ease into a less demanding routine. The ranch had weathered the difficult years following the water rights dispute and emerged stronger, with diversified operations that included not just cattle, but a respected horse breeding program and agricultural innovations that James had studied during his time at the New Mexico Agricultural College. In 1914, as war clouds gathered over Europe, August and Katherine celebrated their 34th wedding anniversary with a journey to San Francisco, their first extended trip away from truth or consequences since their marriage. They marveled at the rebuilt city, rising phoenix-like from the devastation of the 1906 earthquake, and spent hours walking arm in arm along the waterfront, watching ships from around the world enter and leave the harbor. Did you ever imagine, when you were a girl in Boston, that you would end up an old rancher's wife in New Mexico? August asked as they sat on a bench overlooking the bay. Katherine, her chestnut hair now streaked with silver but her green eyes as bright as ever, smiled at her husband. At 64, August's once brown hair and beard had turned completely white, but he remained straight-backed and strong, his face weathered by decades of sun and wind but still handsome to her eyes. "Never," she admitted. "I thought I might marry a professor or a lawyer, someone like my father. I never dreamed of the West, of wide open spaces and a life so different from the one I knew." She took his hand, the decades of shared labor and love evident in the matching calluses and wrinkles. "But I wouldn't change a moment of it, August. Not one moment." As they returned to truth or consequences and the familiar comfort of Thornton Ranch, they found themselves reflecting more often on the journey they had shared, from that first meeting on the train to the life they had created together. The ranch was thriving under James's management. Their children were established in careers and families of their own, with 7 grandchildren between them, and the community they had helped build was prosperous and forward-looking. In the spring of 1917, as the United States prepared to enter the Great War in Europe, August suffered a mild heart attack while mending fences on the North Pasture. Though he recovered, the incident forced him to further reduce his physical labor around the ranch, a limitation he accepted with reluctance but grace. "I never thought I'd live long enough to be told to take it easy," he grumbled good-naturedly, as Katherine insisted he rest in the shade of the porch rather than help James and the hands with the spring branding. "You've earned the right to watch others work for a change," Katherine replied, sitting beside him with her mending basket. "Besides, you can see more from here. Keep an eye on the whole operation." August smiled, recognizing her attempt to salvage his pride. "You always did know exactly what to say to me," he said, reaching for her hand. "From that very first day on the train." Katherine squeezed his fingers. "I was so frightened that day, terrified of the unknown, of a place so different from everything I'd known, of a man I'd never met." "I know," August said softly. "I could see it in your eyes. That's why I didn't rush you, why I suggested staying in town first." "Your patience changed my life," Katherine said. "You gave me time to discover my own courage." "You always had courage," August countered. "You just needed the space to recognize it in yourself." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the activity in the corral, the easy competence with which James directed the work, so like his father that it sometimes caught at Katherine's heart. "We did well, didn't we?" August said finally. With the ranch, with the children, with our life together. Yes, Katherine agreed. We did very well indeed. As the years continued to pass, August and Katherine gradually handed over more responsibilities to James and his wife Caroline, while remaining active in community affairs and the lives of their growing family. Elizabeth's medical practice flourished, and she married a fellow physician, raising two daughters who showed signs of inheriting both their parents' intellect and their mother's determination. Thomas and his wife Sarah expanded the financial side of the ranch operations, establishing the Thornton Agricultural Trust to help other small ranchers and farmers secure loans at fair rates. In 1922, the town of Truth or Consequences celebrated its centennial, and August and Katherine were honored as its longest-serving citizens still actively involved in community life. The celebration included the dedication of the new Thornton School, built with funds donated by the family, and designed to provide educational opportunities for children throughout the county. Standing before the assembled townspeople, Katherine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place and time. When I arrived in Truth or Consequences 43 years ago, I was too frightened to even step off the train, she told the crowd, her voice strong despite her 70 years. If not for the patience and kindness of the man who would become my husband, I might have continued on to who knows where, missing all the joy and purpose I found here. She turned to August, who stood beside her, tall and dignified despite the cane he now used. Truth or Consequences has lived up to its unusual name. Here, I found the truth of who I could be, and the consequence has been a life of remarkable fulfillment as a teacher, as a mother, as a member of this community, and most especially as the wife of August Thornton. The applause that followed was warm and sustained, a testament to the respect and affection the town held for the couple who had contributed so much to its development over nearly half a century. Later that night, as they prepared for bed in the ranch house that had been their home for so long, August drew Katherine into his arms. "That was a fine speech you gave today," he said, his blue eyes still bright with pride. "But you left out the part about how much you've given to this community, how much you've given to me." Katherine rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "We gave to each other, August. That's what makes a marriage, a family, a community. The giving and receiving, the building of something together that neither could create alone." "I'm glad you were too scared to leave that train," August murmured, pressing a kiss to her silver hair. "And I'm even more glad I was stubborn enough to climb aboard and wait." "So am I," Katherine whispered, "so very glad." As they drifted to sleep in each other's arms, the night breeze carried the scent of desert sage through the open window, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate wild and free in the land that had become their home, in the life they had built together from an unlikely beginning on a train platform in a town with a most unusual name. In 1925, August and Katherine celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The family had grown to include 18 descendants, ranging from James and Caroline's eldest son William, now a father himself, to Elizabeth's newest granddaughter, barely 3 months old. The celebration was held at Thornton Ranch, which had expanded over the decades to encompass nearly 1,000 acres, and stood as one of the most prosperous operations in the state. Though they were both in their 70s, August and Katherine remained active and engaged with life. August had finally conceded most of the physical labor to younger hands, but still rode out daily to inspect the ranch, his tall figure familiar to all as he surveyed the land he had nurtured for more than half a century. Katherine had retired from formal teaching, but continued to tutor children with special educational needs, and served as president of the state's Historical Preservation Society. Together, they had witnessed the transformation of New Mexico from a rugged territory to a vibrant state, and of Truth or Consequences from a frontier town to a thriving community. They had seen the arrival of automobiles, electric lights, telephones, and even a motion picture theater. Through it all, they had maintained the essential qualities that had sustained their marriage: mutual respect, shared purpose, and a love that had only deepened with the passing years. On a golden autumn afternoon in 1926, as they sat together on the porch of their home watching the sunset paint the mountains with light, August reached for Katherine's hand, a gesture as natural as breathing after 46 years of marriage. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice still strong despite his 79 years, "about that day on the train. What would have happened if I hadn't noticed you were still aboard, if I had simply assumed you'd changed your mind and gone on with my life?" Katherine squeezed his fingers, the familiar warmth of his hand a comfort she had never taken for granted. "I've wondered that myself, over the years. I might have continued to the next stop, found work as a teacher perhaps, or returned east somehow. And I would have missed knowing you," August said softly. "Missed this life we've built, these children we've raised, all of it." "But that's not what happened," Katherine reminded him, her green eyes still bright in her lined face. "You did notice. You did climb aboard. You did wait." August smiled, the expression transforming his weathered features with the same charm that had first begun to win her heart on their early walks through Truth or Consequences. "Best decision I ever made," he declared. "Better than buying this land, better than any business choice or investment. Just waiting, giving you time to find your courage. And you're still waiting for me," Katherine observed with a tender smile. "Still patient after all these years." "Some things are worth waiting for," August replied simply. As the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the desert sky, they sat in comfortable silence. Two people who had journeyed so far together that words were often unnecessary. The night air carried the scents of sage and pinyon pine, the distant sounds of cattle lowing in the pasture, the familiar creaking of the porch swing as they gently rocked, all the elements of home, of the life they had created from what had begun as a business arrangement between strangers. In the spring of 1927, August caught a chill while helping to search for a neighbor's lost child during an unseasonable storm. The child was found safe, but August's chill developed into pneumonia, and at 79, his body struggled to fight the infection. Katherine rarely left his side during the illness, reading to him when he was lucid, cooling his forehead when fever raged, and holding his hand through the worst of the coughing spells. For 2 weeks, August battled the illness, rallying at times only to weaken again. The entire family gathered at the ranch, keeping vigil in shifts, but it was Katherine who remained constant, drawing on reserves of strength that belied her 75 years. On a clear morning in April, with sunlight streaming through the bedroom window and the songs of meadowlarks filling the air, August opened his eyes, his gaze clearer than it had been in days. He found Katherine dozing in the chair beside the bed, her hand still clasping his. Even in sleep, her face showed the strain of the long vigil, but to August she had never looked more beautiful. "Katherine," he whispered, his voice hoarse. She woke instantly, leaning forward with hope illuminating her tired face. "August, how are you feeling?" "Better," he said, managing a small smile. "The fever's broken, I think." Katherine pressed a hand to his forehead, confirming that his skin was cooler than it had been. "Yes, it has. Oh, August." Her voice broke with relief. "Don't cry, my love," he said, reaching up with a weakened hand to brush a tear from her cheek. "I'm not ready to leave you yet. We have more living to do." Katherine bent to kiss him, her tears falling freely now. "Yes, we do, so much more." August's recovery was slow but steady. By summer, he had regained enough strength to sit on the porch and watch the ranch activities, though he tired easily and required more rest than before his illness. Katherine hovered at first, until August gently teased her about treating him like one of her schoolchildren. After that, she found a balance between care and independence, allowing him to regain his strength at his own pace. "You know," August said one evening as they watched the fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk, "I've been thinking about our story, how we met, how we built this life together." "What about it?" Katherine asked, settling more comfortably against his side. "It deserves to be remembered," he said. "Not just by us or even by our family, but by others who might find hope in it." Katherine considered this. "What do you propose?" "I think you should write it down," August suggested. "You've always had a way with words, and it's an unusual tale, a Boston lady too frightened to leave a train, a rancher who climbed aboard and waited, the life that grew from that strange beginning." The idea took root in Katherine's imagination. During August's convalescence, she began to write in the quiet hours while he rested, filling notebook after notebook with their story, not just the beginning, but all that had followed. She wrote of their courtship, their marriage, the births of their children, the struggles and triumphs of building a ranch and a community. She wrote of the changes they had witnessed, the people they had known, the love that had sustained them through it all. By the following spring, as August's health continued to improve and life at Thornton Ranch resumed its normal rhythms, Katherine had completed her manuscript. At Elizabeth's suggestion, she submitted it to a publisher in Santa Fe without much expectation of interest. To her surprise, the publisher responded enthusiastically, seeing in her personal narrative a valuable record of Western expansion and the role of women in frontier communities. Waiting for Katherine. A New Mexico love story was published in the autumn of 1928 with a modest initial printing. The publisher had arranged for readings and signings in several cities across the Southwest, events that August insisted on accompanying Katherine to despite the travel involved. "I'm not missing the chance to see my wife become a literary celebrity," he declared with a twinkle in his eye. "Besides, someone needs to make sure these city folks don't get the wrong impression of a frontier rancher." The book found an audience larger than anyone had anticipated. Readers were drawn to the authentic voice of a woman who had lived the transition from the rough frontier days to modern statehood, and to the love story at its heart. Letters arrived from across the country, many from women who had made similar journeys into the unknown, others from young people inspired by the courage and commitment described in Katherine's narrative. On their 50th wedding anniversary, in April of 1930, the town of Truth or Consequences held a celebration in honor of August and Katherine. The event was attended not only by family and local residents, but by readers of Katherine's book who had traveled considerable distances to meet the couple whose story had touched them. Standing before the gathered crowd, August's arms steady around Katherine's waist, they received the community's tribute with characteristic humility and grace. "50 years ago," August said, his voice still carrying despite his 83 years, "I waited on a train platform for a bride who never appeared. Instead of giving up, I climbed aboard that train and found a frightened young woman from Boston who couldn't quite bring herself to step into a new life." He looked down at Katherine, his blue eyes still vivid in his time-worn face. "I didn't know then that I was meeting not just a potential wife but my true partner," the love of my life, the mother of my children, and the heart of my home." Catherine's eyes shone with unshed tears as she took up the thread. "And I didn't know that the patient man who sat across from me, offering understanding instead of demands, would become the center of a life more fulfilling than anything I could have imagined. A life that has taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to step forward despite it." As the celebration continued around them, August led Catherine to a quiet corner of the garden where they could observe the festivities without being at the center of attention. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren played on the lawn, the youngest just learning to walk, the oldest now adults with children of their own. James and Caroline, Thomas and Sarah, Elizabeth and her husband David moved among the guests, the next generation of Thorntons now carrying forward the legacy August and Catherine had begun. "We've been blessed, haven't we?" August said softly, his arm around Catherine's shoulders. "With time, with family, with each other." Catherine leaned into his embrace, marveling at how, even after 50 years, the solid warmth of him still brought her comfort and joy. "More blessed than I ever dreamed possible," she agreed. "And to think I almost let fear rob me of all this." "But you didn't," August reminded her. "When it mattered most, you found your courage. You put your hand in mine and stepped off that train into a new life." "Because you waited," Catherine said simply. "You gave me time to choose, to decide for myself. That was the greatest gift anyone had ever given me."